You have studied and criticized powerful leaders and nations in times of global conflict and struggles for power. So let me ask you, what do you think motivates Vladimir Putin? Is it power, legacy, fame, geopolitical influence, or the flourishing of a nation he loves and represents?
I have no particular insight into Putin's mind. I can only watch the actions over the last 20, 25 years and read the statements. Took power about almost 25 years ago, has held it since as prime minister or president. Uh, his first task was to try to overcome the chaos and disarray of the 1990s. During the 90s, Gorbachev had a proposal. He called for a cooperative enterprise with the West. They would share an effort to rebuild what he called a common European home, in which there would be no military alliances, just Russia, Western US accommodation, with a move towards social democracy in former USSR and comparable moves in the United States. Well, that was quickly smashed. The United States had no interest in that. Uh, Clinton came along pretty soon, early 90s. Uh, Russia was induced to adopt what was called shock therapy, harsh, quick market transformation, which devastated the economy, created enormous social disarray, rise of what are called oligarchs, kleptocrats, great high mortality. And Clinton started the policy of expanding NATO to the east in violation of firm, unambiguous promises to Gorbachev not to do so. Yeltsin, Putin's friend, opposed it. Other Russian leaders opposed it, but they didn't react. They accepted it. When Putin came in, he continued that policy. Meanwhile, did reconstruct the Russian economy. Russian society became a viable, deeply authoritarian society under his tight control. He himself was organized a major kleptocracy with him in the middle, apparently became very wealthy. On the international front, he pretty much continued the former policies. As U.S. Diplomats, practically every diplomat who had any contact with Russia had been dispatched there or knew about it, as they all warned from the 90s that what Clinton was doing, expanded by Bush too afterwards, was reckless and provocative. That Russia did have a clear red line before Putin, which he adhered to, namely no NATO membership for Ukraine and Georgia. Uh, this is pretty much how things went on through the 2000s, 2014, 2008. George Bush, President Bush, did invite Ukraine to join NATO. That was vetoed by France and Germany, but under US pressure, it was kept on the agenda. The Russians continued to object. Western diplomats, including the current head of the CIA and its predecessors, warned that this was reckless, provocative, shouldn't be done, continued. Putin didn't do much. He stayed with it until pretty recently. After 2014, the uprising that threw out the former president who was pro-Russian instituted anti-Russian laws, the United States and NATO began to a policy of moving to effectively integrate Ukraine into the NATO command, joint military exercises, training, sending weapons, and so on. Putin objected, other Russian leaders objected. They're unified on this, but didn't do much. Continued with the proposals that that Ukraine be excluded from NATO and that there be some form of autonomy for the Donbass region. Meanwhile, in reaction to the uprising, the Maidan uprising 2014, Russia moved in and took over Crimea, protecting its one warm water base and major naval base. U.S. objected and recognized it, but things continued without notable conflict. Won't go through all the details. When Joe Biden came in, he expanded the program of what U.S. military journals call de facto integration of Ukraine within NATO. Proposed September 2021, proposed enhanced program of preparation for NATO admission. It's extended with a formal statement in November. We're now practically up to the invasion. Putin's position hardened. France, mainly France, to an extent Germany, did make some moves towards possible negotiations. Putin dismissed them, moved on to the direct invasion. That's what are his, to get back to your question, what motivates him? I presume what he's been saying all along, namely establishing his legacy as a leader who overcame the extensive destruction of Russia and massive weakening over it, restored its position as a world power, prevented Ukraine from entering NATO. It may have further ambitions as to dominating and controlling Ukraine, very likely. There is a theory in the West that he suddenly became a total madman who wants to restore the great Russian Empire. This is combined with gloating over the fact that the Russian military is a paper tiger that can't even conquer cities a couple of kilometers from the border, but defended not even by a regular army. But somehow, along with this, he's planning to attack NATO powers, conquer Europe, who knows what. It's impossible to put all these concepts together. They're totally internally contradictory. So, what's my judgment? I think what motivates him is what he's been demonstrating in his actions. Restore Russia as a great power, restore its economy, control it as a total dictatorship, enrich himself and his cronies, establish a legacy as a major figure in Russian history, make sure that Ukraine does not join NATO. And probably by now he's hardened the position, maintain Crimea and the southeastern corridor to Russia, and some ambiguous agreements about the Donbass region. That looks like his motivation. There's much speculation that goes beyond this, but it's very hard to reconcile with the assessment of the real world by the same people who are making the grandiose speculations.
Putin has been in power for 22 years. Do you think power has corrupted him?
I don't think anything's changed. It seems to me his policies are about the same as what they were. They've changed in response to changed circumstances. So, very recently, right before the invasion, a few weeks before, for the first time, Putin announced recognition of the independence of the Donbass region. That's a stronger position than before, much stronger. Up till then, he had pretty much kept to the long-standing position of some kind of accommodation within a federal structure in which the Donbass region would have considerable autonomy. So that's a harshening of the position.
So even the human mind of Vladimir Putin, the man?
I can't read his mind. I can only see the policies that he's pursued and the statements that he's made. There are many people speculating about his mind. And as I say, these speculations are, first of all, not based on anything, never said anything about trying to conquer NATO. But more importantly, they are totally inconsistent with the analyses of Russian power by the same people who are making the speculations. So we see the same individual speculating about Putin's grandiose plans to become Peter the Great and conquer, start attacking NATO powers. On the one hand, saying that, on the other hand, gloating over the fact that his military power is so minuscule he can't even conquer uh, towns a couple miles from the border. Well, it's impossible to make sense of that position.
Why did Russia invade Ukraine on February 24th? Who do you think is to blame? Who do you place the blame on?
Well, who's to blame? Any power that commits aggression is to blame. So I continue to say, as I have been for many months, that the invasion, Putin's invasion of Ukraine, is on a par with such acts of aggression as the US invasion of Iraq, the Stalin, Hitler invasion of Poland, other acts of supreme international crime under international law, aggression. Of course, he's to blame.